Hello, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. My name is Steve Van Eiderstein. Thank y'all for joining me again today as we go through and do today's Beatitude from Emmet Fox's Sermon on the Mount. We're going to be doing the third Beatitude today, and this is a very interesting one. This is one that has a little bit more reading to it, has a little bit more explanation to it, and has interesting perspective, right? So I do want to remind you before we get started on this one, in that first Beatitude we read, he talked about how we need to keep in mind that words have changed. The English language has grown. There is different meanings to words we use today that were not the meanings when Emmet Fox was writing, which was about 95 years ago. And also, when he was writing, words had changed since the Bible was written or translated to English, right? So the version he was reading, the English has grown since then too, right? And he talks about that in this. Remember, this book was written in 1934, I believe. I've got this copy right here that was in 1938. Originally copyrighted in 1934. So yeah, this was 90 years ago that this was written. And that's, first of all, incredible that it's still as relevant today as it was then. And the same considerations need to be taken into account, and even more so, honestly, with the technology age and everything that's going on. We need to keep in mind, excuse me, that, yeah, words have definitely changed. There's new words. There's words that aren't used quite in the same way, meanings. So, I think that's really it for the introduction today. And the Beatitude we're going to be doing is, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And it's pretty good one to talk about, one I really enjoy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read first the Beatitude in its entirety from this copy of Emmet Fox's Sermon on the Mount. And then after that, I'll go through and I'll pick some excerpts and some analysis of it from my understanding and my experience with it and how it's actually been implemented in my life and how I bring this into today's verbiage for me too. So here we go. This is the third Beatitude from the book Sermon on the Mount by Emmet Fox. And we're reading out of chapter 2. And this Beatitude is, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Here we go. "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." On the surface, this Beatitude seems to have very little meaning. And what there is seems to be obviously contradicted by the plain facts of everyday life. No sensible person on looking about the world or studying history could certainly accept this saying at its face value, and most honest Christians have passed it by in practice with a regretful feeling that no doubt that is how things ought to be, but that they certainly are not so in fact. But this Beatitude will not do. But this attitude will not do. Sooner or later, the soul reaches a point where evasions and sophistries have to be discarded once and for all, and the facts of life faced squarely at whatever cost. Now, either Jesus meant what he said, or he did not. And either he knew what he was talking about, or he did not. And so, if this saying is to be taken seriously, we are driven to the position which no Christian will care to accept, either that Jesus was saying what he did not really believe, as unscrupulous people do, or that he was talking nonsense. We have to face up to this situation at the very beginning of our study of this Sermon on the Mount. Either Jesus is to be taken seriously, or he is not to be taken seriously, in which case his teaching should be dropped altogether and people should cease to call themselves Christians. To pay lip service to his name, to say that Christianity is the divinely inspired truth, to boast of being Christians, and then quietly evade in practice all the definite implications of this teaching is hypocrisy and weakness of the most utterly fatal kind. Either Jesus is a reliable guide or he is not. If he is to be relied upon, then let us pay him the compliment of assuming that he meant what he said and that he knew best about the art of living. The trouble and sorrow that humanity suffers are really due to the fact that our mode of life is so opposed to the truth that the things he taught and the things that he said seem to us at first sight to be foolish and wild. The fact is that when correctly understood, the teaching of Jesus is found to be not only true, but exceedingly practicable. Indeed, it is the most practicable of all doctrines. We find that he was no sentimental dreamer, no mere dealer in empty platitudes, but the unflinching realist that only a great mystic can be. And the whole essence of his teaching and of its practical application is summed up in this text. This Beatitude is among the half-dozen most important verses in the Bible. When you possess the spiritual meaning of this text, you have the secret of dominion, the secret of overcoming every kind of difficulty. It is literally the key of life. It is the Jesus Christ message reduced to a single sentence. This gnomic saying is actually the philosopher's stone of the alchemists that turns the base metal of limitation and trouble into the gold of comfort or true harmony. We notice that there are two polar words in the text, meek and earth. They are both used in a special and highly technical sense, and they have to be unveiled before the wonderful meaning that underlies them can be found. First of all, the word earth in the Bible does not mean merely this terrestrial globe. It really means manifestation. Manifestation or expression is the result of a cause. A cause has to be expressed or manifested before we can know anything about it, and contrariwise, every expression or manifestation has to have a cause. Now you learn in divine metaphysics, and particularly in the Sermon on the Mount, that all causation is mental, and that your body and all your affairs, your home, your business, and all your experience are but the manifestation of your own mental states. The fact that you are quite unconscious of most of your mental states does not signify, because they are there. Nevertheless, in your subconscious mind, notwithstanding the fact that you have now forgotten them or never were aware of them at all. In other words, your earth means the whole of your outer experience. And to inherit the earth means to have dominion over that outer experience. That is to say, to have the power to bring your conditions of life into harmony and true success. All the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. His soul shall dwell at ease, and his seed prayers shall inherit the earth. The Lord reigneth, let the earth rejoice. So we see that when the Bible talks about the earth, possessing the earth, governing the earth, making the earth glorious, and so forth, it is referring to the conditions of our lives, from our bodily health outwards to the farthest point in our affairs. So this text undertakes to tell us how we may possess or govern or be masters of our own lives and destinies. Now let us see how it is to be done. The Beatitude states that dominion, that is, power over the conditions of our lives, is to be obtained in a certain way, and in the most unexpected of all ways. by nothing less than meekness. The fact is, however, that this word meekness also is used in a special and technical sense. Its true significance has nothing in common with the meaning it now bears in modern English. Actually, there are few more unpleasant qualities in human nature than the one that is nowadays denoted by the word meekness. To a modern reader, the meek suggests a mean-spirited creature, devoid alike of courage and self-respect, of no use to himself or anyone else, crawling over the face of the earth like a worm, and probably hypocritical and mean as well. It suggests Dickens' fawning Uriah Heep at worst, and one of the same author's downtrodden, broken-spirited moral wrecks at best. But Dickens always holds such characters up for warning or ridicule, and never emulation. The modern reader, with these connotations of the word in mind, comes to the Sermon on the Mount and rejects the teaching that it gives, because here on the threshold, he is told that dominion is for the meek, and this doctrine he cannot accept. The true significance of the word meek in the Bible is the mental attitude for which there is no other single word available, and it is this mental attitude that is the secret of prosperity or success in prayer. It is a combination of open-mindedness, faith in God, and the realization that the will of God for us is always something joyous and interesting and vital, and much better than anything we could think of for ourselves. This state of mind also includes a perfect willingness to allow the will of God to come about in whatever way divine wisdom considers to be best, rather than in some particular way that we have chosen for ourselves. This mental attitude, complex in analysis but simple in itself, is the key to dominion, or success in demonstration. There is no one word for it in common speech, because the thing does not exist except for those who are upon the spiritual basis of Jesus Christ's teaching. And if we desire to inherit the earth, we must absolutely acquire this meekness. Moses, who had such extraordinary success in prayer, he overcame the old age belief to the extent of manifesting the physical body of a young man in the prime of his life when, according to the calendar, he was 120 years old, and then transcended matter altogether, or dematerialized without dying, was known preeminently for this quality, as meek as Moses. Moses, we remember, apart from his own personal demonstration, did a marvelous work for the whole nation, getting it out of Egyptian bondage in the face of incredible difficulties, for the successful exodus was a demonstration of Moses and a few advanced souls who were helping him, and influencing the whole subsequent course of history by his teaching and his deeds. Moses had an open mind, ready to be taught new things and new ways of thinking and working. He did not reject fresh revelation because it was novel and revolutionary, as most of his self-satisfied colleagues in the Egyptian hierarchy would have done. He was not, in the beginning at least, free from serious faults of character, but he was too big for intellectual or spiritual pride, and therefore he gradually rose above these defects as the new truth worked in his soul. Moses thoroughly understood that to conform oneself rigorously to the will of God, far from involving the loss of any good, could only mean a finer and better and more splendid life. He did not, therefore, think of it as self-sacrifice, for he knew it to be the highest form of self-glorification in the true and wonderful sense of the word. The self-glorification of the egoist is the mean vanity that leads at last to humiliation. True self-glorification, the glorification that is really glorious, is the glorification of God. The Father in me, he doeth the works, I in thee, and thou in me. Moses had a wonderful understanding of the power of the spoken word to call forth good, which is scientific faith. He was one of the meekest men who ever lived, and no one, excepting our Savior, has inherited the earth to a greater degree. There is a marvelous Oriental saying that meekness compels God Himself. Well, there we go. That, my friends, is the end of that Beatitude. Again, that one was a little bit longer, but what did you think of that? Let me tell you, the first time I read that one, I had some questions. I can tell you that. I definitely had some questions as to what it really meant. I believe I went through it a couple of times because there's a lot there. There's a lot to, like, that thing he opened with, talking about that, how disregarding this beatitude because we don't like the word that's used in it. That we overlook it because how could this actually be true? Because of the associations we have with the word meek. And I think it's incredible the way he did that. It calls out the problem first and foremost with this beatitude, the problem that people have with this one, and how it's not actually what we take it as is at face value. And that's an important thing to really take into account, where he talks about either we follow Jesus, we believe what was said and what was written, or we don't. It's a kind of an all or nothing game with these scriptural writings, right? You can't take 98% of the Sermon on the Mount the way it was written and then disregard this line, though it's easy to desire to, especially because it almost seems very similar to the first one. I think it was blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, right? And I had to give that one some thought too, because the first one, and this is the difference, overall, the first one is saying the internal struggles we have, right? That internal battle we face, the discomfort, the restlessness, the irritability, the discontentedness, the selfishness, and all those. The kingdom of heaven is given to us in the sense of the emotional state of our of our heart and our mind, meaning the peace, the serenity, the love, the kindness, the joy, the happiness. These things are the kingdom of heaven that we get to have within us. And then this one, inherit the earth. I now understand that it's talking about what's outside of us, right? It's talking, the first beatitude was the kingdom of heaven was talking about within us, what we get within us. The second one, or this third one, is talking about inheriting and interacting and engaging with this physical world we live in. And this is a big difference to actually remember, because there's a lot that goes into this. It's accepting this power greater than yourself into your life and then following His will. So it's a very interesting beatitude, because it challenges a lot of the ways we think, right? How can the meek inherit the earth? Because it didn't make sense to me. It makes sense to me now, and I'm grateful for that. So let's get into it. And again, I do enjoy how he pointed out that difference, or that we can't just disregard this one, right? This can't be just a piece of the Bible in the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus's words that we throw to the side. Because if we do it with a piece of it, we have to do it with all of it. So we have to approach this beatitude with an understanding that this is true and right. So what does this mean? And so he really breaks into it. And it's helped me immensely, actually, because it has given me a sense of almost of peace and a feeling of power and strength, I guess, more so. So, um, it's important that to realize that about this one, because there's a lot of power that comes from this. There's a lot of strength that comes from this. Like he says this is the most practicable. Well, what does that mean? Right? He says he goes in to say either Jesus is everything, we believe Jesus completely, or we don't believe him, and all we should quit calling ourselves Christians. And if we were picking the former, right, we have to go into this one. So let's look into it. And then he opens up the actual start of this beatitude, looking at it by saying, hey, this is the most practicable one, which I find interesting because we don't have any clue what it means yet. But I guess he's giving us hope here, saying, hey, this isn't like out of the realm of possibility for you. This is something that's going to be very real to you and tangible to you, something that can be actually practiced rather than to be avoided and confused by. So that, I guess that's a little bit of encouragement. But when you read it, you're like, well, okay, practice this meekness. All right, well, here we go. So, and then he doubles down. He says this is one of the 6 most important verses in the entirety of the Bible. Excuse me. He goes from saying this is the most overlooked to one of the 6 most important. The weight of that juxtaposition, I don't know if that's the right word to use there, that that observation, and then his opinion on the interpretation of this, saying like people are missing out on a magnificent verse in the Bible that's one of the most important. And then he said it's boiled down to the entire teachings of Jesus. I have written here, I wanted to read it again. I've got some notes here again, like I always do. So if you see me looking down, I'm just looking at the next place I want to take this, and just to kind of follow along with my own thoughts. But so this beatitude is among the half dozen most important verses in the Bible. When you possess the spiritual meaning of this text, you have the secret of dominion. Secret and dominion is capitalized, by the way. The secret of overcoming every kind of difficulty. I mean, he's really building up this thing. It is literally the key of life. Talk about the immensity of this verse, like the awesomeness of this verse, really. It is the Jesus Christ message, all in caps, Jesus Christ message, reduced to a single sentence. What an incredible thing. This gnomic saying is actually the philosopher's stone of the alchemists that turns the base metal of limitation and trouble into the gold of comfort or true harmony. So, you want to talk about selling something, right? Like this, what an incredible thing. So he's saying that all of the teachings, all of everything else that Jesus has ever taught, everything else that's taught in the church, every spiritual practice, everything can be wrapped up in this. Now, I don't know about you, but that struck me initially as hard to believe. So if you're there, I encourage you to follow along, because we go into it and we go into our own judgments about it. So, but he's really teeing it up to be something truly magnificent for us to explore. And I'm grateful for that, honestly, because upon understanding it now and the journey that I've personally taken with a God of my understanding and spirituality and my personal growth and thoughts and behaviors, this is true. And this sales job he does right here isn't empty promises. It isn't pie in the sky wishing. It's real. It's kind of even hard to say, that this fantastic thing, and this sentence so overlooked, is really the key to so many things. Key to everything, really, is what he said. The key of life itself, right? The Jesus Christ message reduced to a single sentence. That's pretty substantial thing. So, then he goes into saying, "Hey, the two biggest things we need to talk about is the word meek and earth, right? Because those are the words that we got to take a look at to actually get a true understanding of this." And the first one he addresses is earth, of course, because meek would be too. You got to keep us hanging on to the end, I guess. So earth is what he talks about first, and he takes our common associations, which is the actual planet, the terrestrial planet, I believe he says, and says it's expanded past that. It is, this is a hot word that he used, and he used it multiple times, but manifestation or expression, right? We're not talking about law of attraction necessarily right now. We're talking about creating. We're talking about the immediate experience we're having in this world, right? And it's very interesting to see him bring this in, right? And how he associates all of these things and what he's talking about. And I do again want to say Emmet Fox was a New Thought author, and that was going on at the beginning of the 1900s, early or late 1800s, I believe, too. I'm not sure when it fully originated, but with the actual movement. But this manifestation that we talk about is a very big deal. It's well, especially in today's spiritual realms and spiritual circles, everyone has an opinion on this, but what he's talking about here is, remember, the original reason for this conversation is about the word earth, and he talks about manifestation or expression. So manifestation really does mean expression, right? It really does mean to be created, to be the result of, right? Because a manifestation is what he goes into talk a little bit about here is the effect, right? The expression of something. It's the effect of a cause, right? So this cause and effect principle always needs to be taken into consideration. It's a universal law. It's something that if we understand, we can have a better understanding of this world that we live in, this physical world, and the thoughts that we have in this spiritual realm. It really does have, let me see, so much to do with our day-to-day interactions. Nothing just happens by accident. Everything that's occurring today in this moment is an effect of a cause of known or unknown origin. So it's always the result. It's always the manifestation of a cause you might not even have seen happen, or multiple things that have come to fruition in a single moment, in an expression of a circumstance. So, and then he talks about manifestation of everything in our lives being our mental state, being directly associated to our mental state. What did he say? Your body and all your affairs, your home, your business, and all your experiences are the manifestation of your own mental states. And James Allen talked about this quite a bit. that James Allen, as a man thinketh, how you think dictates your reality. Now, it can be in a metaphysical sense, saying, hey, if I hold this in my mind, there's that whole practice of it, the manifestation stuff. I think there's a lot more to it than just thinking about something. There's intention and emotion, and there's actual drive and action that has to go into these things. But we're also talking about perspective, right? We're talking about you can be in the exact same situation one moment to the next, and shifting a perspective, just that movement from this perspective to that, can change your entire world, can change your entire being and understanding. It's incredible, actually. So it's something to keep in mind. So he sums it up, and I'm going to just read this right now, that earth fully means everything in our outer experience, every effect we're experiencing, every cause we're initiating, and every perspective we're having. So I want to just read this part here, 29. In other words, your earth means the whole of your outer experience, and to inherit the earth means to have dominion over that outer experience. That is to say, you have power to bring your conditions of life into harmony and true success. This is something that's empowering you to say, it is in your hands, and it's been my direct experience that this is true. I'm so grateful I read this after being in recovery and on my spiritual journey for only 18 months, maybe even, about 2 years, I think, is when I first read this one. I'll try to figure that out and give you a definite number sometime, or a definite time frame. But it gave me joy, or it gave me almost, it just encouraged me that there was more I could do than just be the victim of the world and hope I got lucky. It gave me, between what I knew from James Allen's As a Man Thinketh, the program of recovery I worked, to have this added in on top really gave me some drive to change things even more. Like the depth of the experience I had with this piece of literature drove so much change in my life and so much growth and opportunity, and I can't say more about it. Like there's some books that really have changed my life, and this is another one of them. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, that was one of them too. So it lets me feel like I can influence and create in all areas of my life, whether it's my personal health, my finances, a whole lot of things, and gives me the sense that I can take actions that will help me progress further. So, which is a beautiful thing. Hope, I guess, is what I'm talking about. It gave me hope that I can change things through the help of a spiritual practice and some understanding. And hope you can't really beat, can you? If there's hope, there's a willingness. So maybe that's why I talked about this first, because this is some motivating, encouraging, empowering, hopeful stuff. So then we get in, how did he say it? I wrote it down. Now we get to the how, right? Now let's see how it is to be done, is how he wrote it, right? So the Beatitude says that dominion, that is power over the conditions of our lives, is to be obtained in a certain way, and in the most unexpected of all ways, by nothing less than meekness. And he goes really into, the problem we have with the word meek, because that's what the issue is with this whole Beatitude, right? Inherit the earth sounds great, even if you don't know the spiritual true depth of understanding that we just talked about here. But even if you just inherit the earth in a very superficial way, still sounds good. But the meek does not. And my first impressions, I wrote them down just because, like, when I hear meek, I can still remember what I associated with. It was a spineless person, a miserable person, a coward, and completely only acting in self-interest, right? So it's just lowly, like not a person I want to be around, right? Meek does like no backbone. I did not have a good association at all with this word. So I'm glad he kind of broke into it, and he even gave the associations that he has, or from popular culture at the time with Dickens, and saying that he would have these people that represented this meekness as a bad example, not something to be modeled after. And that's what we associate with meekness. So if that's the case, why the hell is it written in this Beatitude, right? Why would a spineless, miserable, mean person inherit the earth? Well, that's not what it means, turns out. And he says it best, so I'm not going to try to even. I'm just going to read what he has to say first, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. The true significance of the word meek in the Bible is the mental attitude for which there is no other single word available. And it is the mental attitude which is the secret of prosperity or success in prayer. It is a combination of open-mindedness, faith in God, and the realization that the will of God for us is always something joyous and interesting and vital and much better than anything we could think of for ourselves. So, let's think about that. Open-mindedness. So, getting away from what we think might be best, or getting away from what we think we know. Faith in God, a belief that God is in charge of this whole thing, or following God is the way to do something, right? And the realization that the will of God for us is always something joyous and interesting and vital, and much better than anything we could think of for ourselves. That, I can tell you, was very hard for me to grasp onto. My self-will run riot was all over the place. It was it took a while to actually have a full trust and faith in a power greater than myself and the God of my understanding, and turn my will in my life over the care of God as I understood him, as those who are in 12-step programs know that's the third step, right? Be willing to do that, to be willing to have that faith and trust that whatever will happen by following the will of God is better than things I could think of, is better than a way of or result that I could take into consideration. And to be fair, like, that's been true in so many areas of my life. When I practice this faith and this open-mindedness and this willingness and trust the experiences I've had, that things turn out much better when I do the right things as per a spiritual way of living, then let me tell you, it's not always easy, but it always turns out for the right thing. So to say that, and then this state of mind also includes a perfect willingness to allow the will of God to come about in whatever way divine wisdom, capitalized, considers to be the best, rather than in some particular way that we have chosen for ourselves, right? So what this is talking about is to live 100% dedication to living in a way that the will of God can work through you. Now, that sounds like a big order again, So, practical example, and he said this was practical and practicable, would be to be honest in all things, regardless of whether or not you think it serves you, right? To be kind in all ways, to be forgiving, to be loving, to have faith and to have courage, right? To take the next actions as per these principles, to live a principled life rather than a selfish, self centered life caring only about yourself. Right? We have these practices to emulate this beautiful way of living, but it doesn't always in a moment feel good to do. And I know that sounds obvious, but when you know that, when you can really understand that I will have to make decisions to do the right thing, or I wrote in here to live righteously, which is also another way to say live like Christ, to have a Christ-like way of living, to become as close to living as Jesus would have. That's the real ideal here. That's what we're shooting for, is to live like Jesus, and that Christ-like ideal that he modeled for us. And that's where we need to be headed to. But that means we're not always going to be, how to say it, it's not always going to feel good, right? We are going to knowingly make a decision to do the right and principled thing when we are fully aware that it might not play out in a way we want it to, that it's going to feel good for us, that's going to bring us to where we think we need to be, right? So this meekness is really a lessening of our selfish and self-centered will and allowing the will of God to work through us. Because I can tell you, it's those moments where we do the principled thing and not the self-serving thing that God shows up the most, I believe. That power greater than yourself can actually work through you because you're able to connect to somebody else. It's absolutely incredible. Now, I'm just a guy, right? So I won't claim to know more than anyone else, but I believe that's how it's worked for me. I believe that's how I've experienced a God of my understanding in my life, is when others have practiced principled living, which by all accounts didn't serve their immediate best interest, but down the road, I'm sure did give them a spiritually fulfilling return. But having that willingness to sacrifice is incredible, right? Sacrifice is huge. It's to sacrifice our own will for the will of God to work through us by living a principled life. And then you shall inherit the earth, right? This world will be yours, right? When you live this way of life, genuinely and truly to be of service to the God of your understanding and others, you're able to create and have these expressions and of these effects in your life that you didn't think were possible, that you didn't believe could even happen, that will leave you with your jaw on the floor sometimes. Let me tell you, it's an amazing experience when there's something you never would have thought to have happened or could have happened. I'm going to say it manifests right in front of you, and you're just left speechless. So, and then he goes into an example of this meekness, which was Moses, and that a common phrase was the meek as Moses. So, what does that mean? And he talks about I have 32 for the first line. This is the summation, I think, of this meekness. Moses thoroughly understood that to conform oneself rigorously to the will of God, far from involving the loss of any good, could only mean a finer and better and more splendid life. He did not therefore think of it as self-sacrifice, for he knew in the highest form of self-glorification in the true and wonderful sense of the word, meaning glorifying the God of his understanding, glorifying God through his actions and his life. Right? That's the meekness of Moses, completely conforming yourself to this Christ-like ideal, this righteous living. And what a powerful thing to actually understand. What a powerful beatitude to actually do. And he talked about in there with Moses that, he manifested, according to the Bible, Moses had the body of a man in his prime, well over 100, because of his success in prayer and his success in service, right? He was given, he was able to obtain this body to continue to do the work of the God in that he was serving and that he was living in accordance with. So incredible, absolutely incredible. So the world is open to you if you have right understanding and dedicate to yourself to living a principled life of righteousness, wherever that might take you. That's the most amazing part. It doesn't mean you're going to end up in one specific spot. It means the plan for you and the people that you will impact and the world and the way you will change the world will only come through living this righteous life. That doesn't mean you pick the way it's going to look. You show up and you practice these virtues, and then suddenly life happens, which is pretty amazing. So, but that's it for today. And that's the end of this Beatitude. And it's an absolutely incredible one. I hope you all find it as enlightening and encouraging and empowering as I did, and as I continue to find it. And I will be looking forward to the next one, which is blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Sounds like a good one to me. So go ahead, give us a like, give us a subscribe, check out the podcasts for As a Man Thinketh, which was the first book we went through this year. And then last year also, just so everyone knows, there was a daily reading from James Allen that I would do, and a summation of it as well. And I think they were about 15 minutes apiece, 12 to 20 minutes, depending on the day. So if you want a daily shot of spirituality, if you want a daily thing to open your mind, go ahead and give those a look. You can find them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can find them on YouTube now too. They were uploaded to YouTube, so please give them a check out, or give them a check out. That wasn't the best way to say that. Check them out, give them a like, and give them a listen, I think is what I was going for. So thank you all for joining me, though, and your support. It's always appreciated. And until next time, thanks.